This is my story. Lately I've been dealing with depression a lot and finding it really difficult to find people that will understand and listen. I just don't think anybody really cares right now, so it's hard. One person says they can't understand why I'm depressed or why I just don't get over it, so I'm going to explain. My parents had been divorced for as long as I can remember, and for the first 12 years of my life my parents lived in the same town, so it was not a big deal for me. But when I turned 12, my mother had moved away, moved all of us to a different town. But when I turned 12, I went to live with my dad full time, and I spent all that summer with my dad and started school back in my original hometown. And one day he came home from work and he was having a heart attack in front of me. I was 12. I didn't know what was going on, even though I should have, because at the time my mother was taking EMT classes, and I would read her textbooks when she came home. I just found them really interesting. So, and I did read about the signs of a person having a heart attack, and thinking on it now, it was to the T. Had the weird acidic smell because he was sweating so much. He collapsed on the front porch, his eyes rolled back of his head. He was actually foaming out of his mouth. But he snapped out of it. He stood up and he said he'd be okay. And instead of going to the hospital or anything like that, he decided he was just going to go to bed. So my dad went to his room and called me in a little while later into his room and asked me to turn the fan on for him. So I did, and he said, "Good night, son." I said, "Good night, Dad," and that was the last thing I said to him. The next morning when I went to go get up for school, he didn't. He was usually gone at least an hour before I even got up for school, but he was still laying in bed. He didn't move. And my cousin showed up because he traveled the same road on his way to work and noticed that my dad's truck was still there. He found me just screaming at my dad to tell him to wake up, and he wouldn't. So it was really hard for me.
What does it mean to be depressed? Everyone experiences feelings of sadness from time to time, but depression is not simply having the blues. Instead, it's a complex illness that affects mood, thoughts, even the body. It can interfere with a person's ability to work, sleep, eat, and enjoy pleasurable activities.
I think the thing that separates depression from, in a sense, run-of-the-mill sadness or loneliness or bad moods, right, is that depression becomes a situation in which one cannot function any longer, right? So one cannot work as they once did, one's relationships suffers, one's standing in the community and the role they're expected to play falters.
In the U.S. alone, as many as 25% of the population will suffer from depression at some point in their lives. Without treatment, it can become debilitating, lasting weeks, months, or even years. The illness has far-reaching economic consequences as well. Depression costs U.S. businesses an estimated $83 billion a year. The most common symptoms of depression include listlessness, an inability to experience pleasure, and changes in sleep patterns and eating habits. If you are suffering from depression, you might not experience every symptom. and the severity of symptoms varies from person to person. Certain types of depression, like bipolar disorder, can cause some people to experience hallucinations. These can range from hearing or seeing things that aren't there to false beliefs. At its most extreme, depression might lead individuals to harm themselves. It's estimated that as many as 15% of people with untreated depression end their own lives.
If left untreated, depressive disorders can range from, if I might speak crudely, just making your life a shambles, all the way up through and including suicide.
Experts have identified a number of risk factors for depression. It is sometimes triggered by a major event, such as a serious illness, a divorce, or the loss of a loved one.